A mysterious encounter. Ethan adjusted his glasses and rubbed his eyes. It was late, and the glow from his computer screen felt heavier than usual. The quiet hum of machines in his small lab was the only sound that kept him company. He was used to working alone. That was how he preferred it. Until tonight. A soft noise broke the silence. Ethan froze, listening carefully. At first, he thought it was just the wind tapping against the window, but then he heard it again, closer this time, a faint melodic hum like a distant song. Slowly, he stood up and moved toward the source of the sound. The lab's entrance door shimmered faintly as if someone was standing just outside. Ethan's heart raced. He wasn't expecting visitors. Hesitating for a moment, he finally unlocked the door. Standing there was a girl, except she wasn't like any girl he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly under the fluorescent lights, reflecting soft shades of violet and silver. Her hair floated gently as if caught in a breeze that didn't exist, and around her neck, a glowing amulet pulsed softly. "Who are you?" Ethan stammered, stepping back. The girl's large, bright eyes met his, and she tilted her head curiously. "My name is Zara," she said softly. Her voice was calm, but there was something unusual about it, almost like two voices speaking at once. "I need your help." Ethan blinked. "Help? I think you have the wrong person." Zara stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. She looked around the cluttered lab, her gaze settling on a device Ethan had been working on. The amulet around her neck pulsed faster. "It's you," she said, eyes narrowing slightly as if confirming something. "There's something inside you." Ethan's eyes widened. "Inside me? What does that even mean?" Zara took a step closer, and the amulet's glow brightened. Ethan instinctively stepped back, feeling the strange warmth in his chest. "I don't understand," Ethan muttered, half to himself. He wasn't the kind of person who got caught up in strange situations. He was a scientist, not some hero from a sci-fi movie. Zara's expression softened. "I know this is confusing, but I promise I wouldn't be here if it wasn't important." She held up the amulet, and as it floated gently in her palm, Ethan felt that same warmth again, this time stronger. "What is that thing?" he asked. "This amulet is connected to my people. It reacts to certain energies. And right now," she said, meeting his eyes, "it's reacting to you." Ethan shook his head, trying to process everything. "Look, I'm just a normal guy. I run experiments. I write papers. I'm not special." Zara's gaze didn't waver. "You may not think so, but I've traveled far, and this amulet hasn't reacted like this until now. I don't believe in coincidences." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but something about the sincerity in her voice made him stop. There was desperation in her eyes, like someone running from something. "Who are you running from?" he asked quietly. Zara looked away for the first time, her expression troubled. "Hunters," she said after a long pause. "They seek this amulet. If they find it, if they find me." She didn't finish the sentence, but Ethan understood enough. Ethan's curiosity, the very thing that made him a scientist, began to tug at him. Whatever this was, it felt too big to ignore. "All right," he said, crossing his arms. "Let's say I believe you. What do you need from me?" Zara's eyes lit up with relief. "I need to understand why the amulet reacts to you. I think the answer lies within your DNA." Ethan blinked. "DNA? You think this has something to do with my genetics?" "Yes," Zara said simply. Ethan let out a long breath, already regretting his decision. "Fine. I'll run some tests. But this doesn't mean I'm signing up for anything crazy." Zara smiled faintly. "Thank you, Ethan." As Ethan turned toward his equipment, he couldn't help but feel like he had just stepped into a much larger story, one that might not let him walk away so easily. Outside the lab, hidden beneath the shadows, two glowing red eyes watched through the window. The hunters had already found their trail, a connection beyond worlds. Ethan's lab was dimly lit, the soft hum of computers filling the silence as Zara sat cross-legged on the examination table. Her glowing amulet rested in her palm, casting faint patterns on the walls. Ethan paced in front of her, rubbing the back of his neck as he processed everything she had told him. "So let me get this straight," he said, stopping and pointing at her. "You think my DNA is connected to this ancient alien prophecy?" Zara nodded calmly, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "It's not just a prophecy. It's a genetic marker. Your kind, the humans, have been part of our history for centuries. You just never knew it." Ethan let out a breath, shaking his head. "Humans barely know what's happening on our own planet, let alone in deep space." He frowned, leaning closer to the amulet. The closer he got, the warmer he felt, like standing too close to a fire. "And you're saying this thing reacts to me because I'm special?" "Not special," Zara corrected, tilting her head. "Compatible." Ethan froze, blinking. "Compatible? I'm not sure that makes me feel better." Zara smiled faintly, the edges of her lips curling in quiet amusement. "It should. My people have searched for this connection for a long time. The amulet is a key to something far greater, but without the right match, it's useless." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "And what exactly is it unlocking?" For the first time, Zara hesitated. She glanced down at the amulet, her fingers tracing the outer rim in slow, deliberate circles. "A power that hasn't been awakened in generations, the kind that could save my people, or destroy us if it falls into the wrong hands." Ethan sat heavily in his chair, letting her words settle. He wasn't prepared for this. He was a scientist, someone who dealt with facts and equations, not glowing alien artifacts and prophecies. But the way Zara looked at him, like he was more than just some lab rat, made it hard to dismiss her entirely. "Okay," he said finally, leaning forward. "Let's figure this out. How do we test if my DNA really is the key to this thing?" Zara's eyes brightened. "Your machines," she said, pointing to the array of equipment lined up against the wall. "You study human biology, right?" "More or less," Ethan said, standing up. "I can run a basic scan. But if this thing is tuned to alien tech, I'm not sure my equipment is advanced enough." "Start with what you have," Zara said, her gaze steady. "The amulet will do the rest." Ethan sighed and pulled out a sleek handheld scanner, the kind used for genetic mapping. He motioned for Zara to lie down on the table, but she remained seated, watching him carefully. The scanner flickered to life, casting a blue light across her skin. As Ethan traced the scanner over her, the amulet responded immediately, glowing brighter, the pulse of light synced with the rhythm of her heartbeat. Ethan's brow furrowed. "I've never seen anything like this." "Keep going," Zara urged. He hesitated for a moment, then brought the scanner to his own chest. As soon as the beam passed over his heart, the amulet flared so brightly that Ethan had to shield his eyes. The lab filled with an eerie silence. Ethan lowered his hand slowly, blinking to adjust to the dim light. Zara stared at him, wide-eyed. "It's true," she whispered. "The connection is real." Ethan lowered the scanner, his mind racing. "What does this mean for me?" "It means," Zara said, standing up, "that you're part of this now, whether you like it or not." Before Ethan could respond, a sharp noise echoed from outside the lab. Both of them turned toward the door, the hair on the back of Ethan's neck standing on end. Zara's expression darkened. "They found us." Ethan glanced at her. "The hunters." Zara nodded. "They won't stop until they have the amulet. And if they know you're connected to it." Ethan didn't need her to finish the sentence. He was already grabbing a small backpack, stuffing tools and hard drives inside. "We need to leave." Zara stepped closer to him, her hand brushing against his arm. "Thank you," she said softly. Ethan met her gaze for a brief moment. "Don't thank me yet. I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As they slipped out of the lab and into the shadows of the night, the amulet pulsed faintly beneath Zara's cloak, In the distance, unseen eyes watched their every move. A chase begins. The cold night air bit at Ethan's skin as he and Zara slipped out of the lab's side entrance. The streets were nearly empty, bathed in flickering streetlights and the occasional hum of distant traffic. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest, not from the chill, but from the creeping sense of danger that seemed to follow them like a shadow. "They'll expect us to run," Zara whispered, glancing over her shoulder. Her glowing amulet was hidden beneath the folds of her cloak, but its faint warmth pressed against her skin. "The hunters are skilled trackers. We need to be unpredictable." Ethan nodded, adjusting the strap of his backpack. "Unpredictable isn't exactly my specialty. I'm more of a stay in the lab and avoid conflict kind of guy." Zara gave him a sidelong glance. "Well, tonight you're someone else." They moved quickly down the alley, sticking close to the walls to avoid being seen. Despite Ethan's attempt to stay calm, every noise felt louder than it should. The rustling of trash bags, the distant bark of a dog. Each sound made his nerves tighten. Suddenly, Zara grabbed his arm and pulled him into a narrow passage between two buildings. Ethan stumbled but kept quiet as she pressed a finger to her lips. A few seconds later, they heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, and far too heavy to belong to any ordinary passerby. Ethan didn't dare breathe. Zara's grip on his arm tightened as she peered through the small gap between the buildings. 3 figures emerged under the streetlight. They weren't human, at least not entirely. Their silhouettes flickered unnaturally, as if they were glitching in and out of the shadows. The tallest of them carried a sleek, silver device that pulsed in his hand. He held it out in front of him, sweeping it slowly over the area like a scanner. Each time the device beeped, the figure paused, tilting its head as if listening to something no one else could hear. Ethan leaned closer to Zara. "Is that them?" She nodded, her voice barely a whisper. "Hunters. They can sense energy from the amulet." Ethan swallowed hard. "And we're just standing here waiting for them to find us." "No," Zara said, pulling him further into the alley. "We're moving." They crept along the narrow space until they reached the other end of the alley. Zara stepped out first, scanning the area before motioning for Ethan to follow. As they crossed the next street, Ethan felt the weight of the hunter's presence lingering behind them. Even though they hadn't been spotted, the tension felt suffocating. "Where are we even going?" Ethan asked as they slipped behind an old warehouse. "To find shelter," Zara replied, quickening her pace. "We need to get off the streets." Ethan exhaled sharply. "There's an abandoned subway entrance not far from here. It's sealed off, but I can get us inside." Zara nodded in approval. "Lead the way." They moved swiftly, crossing through darkened alleyways and forgotten parts of the city. The abandoned subway entrance sat behind a rusted gate, half covered in ivy and debris. Ethan knelt down, pulling at the gate until it creaked open just enough for them to slip inside. Zara glanced back one last time before stepping through. The city behind them felt strangely distant, as if they were crossing into a different world entirely. Once inside, Ethan flicked on a small flashlight from his backpack. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing cracked tiles and empty tracks stretching into the abyss. "We should be safe here for a while," Ethan said, lowering his voice as they walked deeper into the station. Zara's eyes scanned the shadows carefully. "For now." As they settled near an old maintenance room, Ethan finally let himself relax, leaning against the wall. "You said they track the amulet's energy. Can't you just turn it off? Or, I don't know, hide it somehow?" Zara sat down across from him, holding the amulet gently in her hands. "It's not that simple. The amulet isn't just a tool. It's alive in its own way. Suppressing its energy would be like stopping your heart. It reacts to danger, and right now." She glanced toward the subway tunnel. "It knows we're still being followed." Ethan frowned, running his fingers through his hair. "Great. So, we're just waiting until they catch up to us." "No," Zara said firmly, her gaze locking with his. We'll fight when the time comes, but you're not alone in this." Ethan felt an unexpected sense of reassurance in her words. For the first time since this all started, he didn't feel entirely powerless. But deep down, he knew the hunters wouldn't stop. This chase was only beginning, a hidden truth revealed. The cold air of the subway station pressed in around them, thick with dust and the scent of rusted metal. Ethan sat cross-legged against the cracked wall, his flashlight flickering weakly as the battery wore down. Across from him, Zara sat with the glowing amulet resting in her lap. Its soft pulse lit up her face in faint, golden waves. Ethan broke the silence first. "You keep saying this thing is tied to me, but I don't understand how. I've never even heard of your people before tonight." Zara glanced at him thoughtfully, fingers tracing the edge of the amulet. "That's because the connection isn't something you could see. It's not just history, it's deeper. It's in your blood, Ethan." He frowned, leaning forward. "My blood? Are you saying humans are part alien?" Zara's lips curled into a faint smile. "Not quite. But long ago, before even your earliest civilizations, our paths crossed. Your ancestors helped my people survive. In return, a part of our essence was passed on, carried quietly through generations. Most humans don't have it anymore. But you—" She held up the amulet, and its glow brightened in response. "You do." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "That doesn't make any sense. I would have noticed something by now." Zara shook her head. "No, you wouldn't. This part of you has been dormant, until the amulet reawakened it. That's why the hunters are after you. They know the amulet can't fully unlock its power without someone like you to activate it." Ethan leaned back, running his hands through his hair. "So let me get this straight. I'm carrying around ancient alien DNA that somehow makes me the key to unlocking whatever this amulet does." "Yes," Zara said simply. Ethan let out a breath, unsure whether to laugh or panic. "That's insane. I'm not exactly hero material. I run experiments, write reports, and occasionally forget to water my plants. I'm not built for this." Zara's expression softened. "Neither were the ones before you. But they didn't choose this path either. It chose them." Ethan looked away, trying to process everything. The hum of the amulet seemed to grow louder in the silence, filling the space between them. Suddenly, Zara stood, her eyes narrowing as she gazed down the dark subway tunnel. "They're close." Ethan scrambled to his feet. "What? I thought this place was hidden." "It was," Zara said, gripping the amulet tightly. "But the longer we stay in one place, the easier it is for them to track us." Ethan cursed under his breath. "All right, what's the plan? Do we just keep running?" Zara hesitated for a moment, then shook her head. "No, running won't stop them. We need to face them, soon." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Face them? You saw those guys, right? They don't exactly look like the talk things out type." Zara's eyes met his, calm but unwavering. "We won't face them alone." Ethan crossed his arms. "You keep saying that, but I haven't seen anyone else jumping in to help." Zara stepped closer, placing the amulet gently against his chest. The warmth spread through Ethan's body, but this time it felt different, sharper, more intense. His vision flickered for a brief moment, and images flooded his mind. Strange symbols, unfamiliar stars, and glimpses of battles fought long ago. As the vision faded, Ethan staggered back, gasping for breath. "What was that?" Zara's gaze was steady. "A memory, one that belongs to you now." Ethan stared at her, his heart racing. "I saw people like you, fighting, but I also saw humans fighting alongside them." "Because they did," Zara said. "And you're one of the few who can carry on that legacy." Ethan pressed a hand to his chest, feeling the lingering warmth beneath his skin. For the first time since this began, he felt something stirring inside him. Something more than fear or confusion. He met Zara's gaze, All right, let's face them. She nodded, gripping the amulet tightly. We'll make our stand. Together. As they prepared to leave the station, the soft echoes of footsteps began to drift down the tunnel. The hunters were coming. But this time, Ethan wasn't running. The turning point. The abandoned subway station felt heavier with each passing second. The air was thick with anticipation, and every distant echo sounded like the footsteps of the hunters closing in. Ethan tightened the straps of his backpack, though he wasn't sure why. No amount of gear could prepare him for what was coming. Zara knelt on the floor, drawing faint patterns into the dust with her finger. The symbols glowed faintly before fading into nothing. Ethan watched, curiosity overriding his nerves. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly, his voice bouncing off the tiled walls. "Preparing," Zara replied, not looking up. "These symbols are wards, barriers that might slow them down." Ethan crouched beside her, studying the markings. "They don't look like much." Zara smirked. "They're not meant to. The best defenses are the ones your enemies overlook." Ethan exhaled, leaning back against the wall. "I still don't get why they're after this amulet. I mean, I get that it's powerful or whatever, but why go through all this trouble?" Zara paused, her finger hovering over the last symbol. The light from the amulet reflected in her eyes as she met his gaze. "Because it's more than just power, it's balance." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Balance." She nodded. "The amulet doesn't just unlock energy. It maintains harmony between worlds, ours and yours. If it falls into the wrong hands, that balance will shatter. Entire planets could fall into chaos." Ethan let out a low whistle. No pressure or anything. Zara smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I know this is overwhelming. I didn't expect to find someone like you, Ethan. I thought I'd be facing them alone." Ethan shifted uncomfortably under her gaze. "Yeah, well, I didn't expect to become part of an intergalactic prophecy either." He glanced at the amulet. "But I guess life's full of surprises." Zara's expression softened. "You're handling it better than most would." Before Ethan could respond, a faint tremor rippled through the floor beneath them. Both of them froze. The symbol Zara had drawn flickered for a moment, then dimmed. "They're here," she whispered. Ethan's heart kicked into overdrive. He reached into his backpack, pulling out a small handheld device that looked suspiciously like a modified taser. Zara arched an eyebrow. "What is that supposed to do?" Ethan shrugged. "I upgraded it. It should at least give them a shock." Zara chuckled softly. "I admire your optimism." They moved quietly to the edge of the platform, peering into the dark tunnel. The faint glow of red lights began to flicker in the distance, growing brighter with each passing second. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. "They're not even trying to hide, are they?" "No," Zara said, her hand drifting toward the amulet. "They want us to know they're coming." Ethan tightened his grip on the taser. "Good. Let them come." As the lights drew closer, the shapes of the hunters began to take form. Tall, imposing figures cloaked in black, their red eyes gleaming beneath the hoods. One of them stepped forward, lifting a hand as if signaling the others to stop. Ethan could feel the weight of the hunter's gaze settle on him. The hunter's voice was low, almost mechanical. "Step aside, human. This does not concern you." Ethan didn't move. His fingers twitched nervously over the taser's trigger, but he kept his ground. "Yeah, I'm gonna have to disagree with you there." The hunter's eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. "You don't understand the forces at play. Hand over the girl and the amulet, and you may yet live." Ethan glanced at Zara, who stood quietly beside him. Her grip on the amulet tightened. "I think I'll take my chances," Ethan said. For a moment, the tunnel fell silent. Then, without warning, the lead hunter lunged forward, moving faster than Ethan could track. Zara reacted instantly, stepping between Ethan and the hunter. The amulet flared to life, unleashing a burst of golden light that sent the hunter staggering back. The glow spread across the platform like ripples in a pond, forcing the other hunters to halt. Ethan shielded his eyes, blinking away the brightness. When he looked again, the lead hunter had regained his footing, but something was different. The red glow in his eyes flickered unsteadily. Zara lowered her hand, the amulet still pulsing faintly. She stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. "Leave now. This fight isn't yours to win." The hunter hesitated, as if weighing his options. Then, with a low growl, he signaled to the others, and they slowly began to retreat into the tunnel's shadows. Ethan watched in disbelief as the hunters disappeared. He exhaled sharply, lowering the taser. "That's it. They're just leaving." "For now," Zara said, turning to face him. "But they'll be back. Stronger." Ethan nodded, running a hand through his hair. "Well, that was a fun warm-up." Zara laughed softly. "You did well, Ethan." He met her gaze and felt something shift inside him, something deeper than fear. For the first time, he believed that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't entirely out of his depth. "We make a good team," Ethan said. Zara smiled. "We're just getting started." The showdown. The subway platform was quiet, too quiet. The hunters had retreated into the shadows, but Ethan could feel their presence lingering, like predators circling just beyond sight. "They'll be back," Zara said, adjusting the amulet around her neck. Its soft glow illuminated the faint lines of worry etched across her face. Ethan tightened his grip on the makeshift taser. "Yeah, I figured." Retreating felt a little too easy. Zara glanced at him, her gaze sharp. "They weren't retreating, Ethan. They were regrouping." Ethan's stomach sank. "Great, so they'll come back stronger and angrier." "Fantastic. They won't risk another direct attack." Zara continued, stepping closer to the edge of the platform. She peered down the dark tunnel, her eyes narrowing. "They'll try to separate us, isolate one of us from the other." Ethan frowned. "Then we stay together. Simple." Zara didn't respond right away. Instead, she knelt down and began drawing symbols into the dust again, different from the ones before. These glowed brighter, lingering longer before fading. "What's that?" Ethan asked, crouching beside her. "Protection," she replied. "But it won't last long. If they break through, we'll need to fight." Ethan chuckled nervously. "Fight? I'm not exactly trained for this kind of thing. I barely passed gym class." Zara looked up, her expression softening. "You're more capable than you think. The amulet reacts to you for a reason. It sees something in you that you might not yet see in yourself." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. "Yeah, well, let's hope it's not overestimating me." A sudden metallic clang echoed down the tunnel, making them both freeze. The sound reverberated through the station, growing louder as it approached. Ethan's eyes darted toward the source, but the shadows were too thick to see anything clearly. "They're coming," Zara whispered. Ethan swallowed hard. "All right, what's the plan?" Zara stood slowly, the amulet glowing brighter as she raised it. "I'll handle the hunters. You focus on keeping the amulet steady." Ethan blinked. "Wait, what?" "Handle the hunters. By yourself." She nodded, meeting his gaze with quiet determination. "I've fought them before. This time, the amulet gives me an advantage." Ethan hesitated. "Zara, if something happens to you—" "It won't," she interrupted gently. "But if it does, you run. Don't let them take the amulet." Ethan shook his head. "No way. We're in this together, remember." Zara opened her mouth to argue, but the words died as the shadows at the far end of the platform began to shift. 3 figures emerged, hunters, their eyes glowing a deep crimson beneath their hoods. The leader stepped forward, holding a long, sleek staff that crackled with dark energy. The hunter's voice echoed across the station. "Enough hiding. Hand over the amulet, or this ends badly for you." Ethan tightened his grip on the taser. "I'm guessing negotiation is off the table." Zara stepped forward, holding the amulet high. Its light flared, pushing back the shadows as if the subway itself rejected the hunter's presence. "You don't belong here," she called out. "Leave now, and you'll be spared." The lead hunter laughed, a cold, hollow sound. Brave words for someone outnumbered. Ethan glanced at Sarah. "You sure about this?" Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she whispered something under her breath, and the amulet's glow erupted into a sphere of light that enveloped both of them. The hunters recoiled, momentarily blinded. "Now!" Sarah shouted. Ethan lunged forward, firing the taser at the nearest hunter. Sparks crackled as the weapon struck home, causing the hunter to stagger backward. Sarah raised the amulet, and tendrils of golden energy shot from it, wrapping around the lead hunter's staff. The hunter growled, yanking the staff free, but the energy didn't let go. Ethan ducked as another hunter swiped at him with a curved blade. He barely avoided the attack, stumbling backward onto the platform. "Sarah, I could use some help here," he yelled. Sarah turned, raising her hand toward Ethan. A barrier of light flickered into existence just as the hunter's blade swung down, deflecting the strike. Ethan scrambled to his feet, breathing heavily. "Okay, that was cool. Do that again." Sarah smiled faintly but didn't respond. She focused on the lead hunter, whose staff had begun to crack under the amulet's grip. The hunter snarled, and with a final burst of strength, shattered the energy tendrils holding him. The platform shook as the staff slammed into the ground. Cracks spiderwebbed beneath their feet, and Ethan stumbled, grabbing onto a metal railing to stay upright. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. Sarah stepped forward, the amulet blazing like a second sun. "Ethan, now." Ethan understood immediately. He reached out, placing his hand over the amulet. As soon as he touched it, warmth surged through his body, and the station around them faded into blinding light. The hunters cried out, their forms dissolving into shadows as the light consumed them. When the brightness dimmed, Ethan found himself standing alone with Sarah on the platform. The hunters were gone. Ethan lowered his hand, chest rising and falling as he caught his breath. "Did we win?" Sarah smiled softly. "For now." Ethan slumped against the wall, letting out a tired laugh. "You know, I thought tonight was going to be boring." Sarah sat beside him, the amulet dimming to a soft pulse. "I told you, our paths are intertwined now. There's no turning back." Ethan glanced at her. "I wouldn't want to turn back anyway." In the distance, the faint glow of dawn began to filter into the station. For the first time in hours, the world felt calm. But Ethan knew this was only the beginning. A new beginning. The first rays of morning sunlight crept through the cracks in the subway tunnel, casting long shadows across the platform. The soft hum of the amulet in Sarah's hands was the only sound left in the aftermath of the battle. Ethan sat beside her, his back against the cold wall, trying to catch his breath. The hunters were gone. For now. But the weight of what had just happened lingered heavily in the air. "You sure they won't come back?" Ethan asked, breaking the silence. Sarah traced the edges of the amulet with her fingers, watching the golden light pulse faintly. "They will, but not for a while. This defeat will slow them down." Ethan exhaled, leaning his head back against the wall. "I guess that's something. Small victories, right?" Sarah smiled softly, though her eyes held the weight of something far greater. Every victory matters, even the small ones. Ethan watched her for a moment, then glanced down at his own hands. He still felt the lingering warmth from the amulet, as if part of its energy had seeped into him during the fight. It was strange, comforting, but strange. "So," Ethan began, stretching his legs out in front of him, "what now? Do we just go back to normal life and pretend none of this happened?" Sarah shook her head slowly. "There is no going back to normal. Not for you. The amulet chose you, Ethan. You felt its power. That connection can't be undone." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Yeah, I was afraid you'd say that." She turned to face him, her expression softening. But that doesn't mean you're alone. The path ahead will be difficult, but I'll walk it with you, for as long as I can." Ethan met her gaze and saw the sincerity in her eyes. "I appreciate that. I really do. But let's be honest. I don't know the first thing about intergalactic balance or ancient alien tech." Zara chuckled quietly. "Neither did I when I started. But you'll learn. And you'll grow into the person the amulet believes you can be." Ethan considered her words, the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He wasn't sure he was ready for this, but then again, he hadn't been ready for any of it. And somehow, he'd made it this far. A soft rumble echoed down the tunnel, distant but approaching. Ethan tensed until he realized it was just the sound of a subway car moving on the far end of the station. It hadn't been operational in years, but something about the sound felt symbolic, like the world was still turning, even after everything that had happened. "Where will you go now?" Ethan asked, standing and dusting himself off. Zara rose gracefully, the amulet still clutched tightly in her hands. "I need to return to my people. They need to know the hunters are still searching for the amulet, and that I found the connection we've been waiting for." Ethan frowned. "You mean me?" "Yes," she said simply. He shifted awkwardly, unsure how to respond. "And what happens when they realize their so-called savior is just a guy who spends too much time on his computer?" Zara's eyes sparkled with quiet amusement. "They'll see what I see, someone willing to stand and fight, even when the odds are against him." Ethan glanced away, embarrassed by the praise but grateful for it all the same. "I guess I could use a break from lab work," he said with a shrug. Zara extended her hand toward him. "Then come with me." Ethan stared at her outstretched hand for a long moment. The logical part of him screamed that this was insane, that he should stay in his lab and let the universe sort itself out. But deep down, he knew that wasn't an option anymore. With a sigh and a small smile, he took her hand. "All right. Let's see where this goes." As their fingers intertwined, the amulet flared to life once more, casting light across the subway station. Ethan felt a surge of energy rush through him. And for the first time, it didn't scare him. It felt right. The world around them seemed to shift, and as they stepped forward, the shadows of the station faded behind them. For Ethan, this wasn't just the end of a strange night. It was the beginning of something far greater. A new chapter, written in light and shadow, with Zara at his side. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: he wasn't running from it anymore.